in this lecture. So the topic of this lecture, final lecture this morning, will be upholding and promoting respect for the principle of the United Nations Charter in weather world through EU international agreements. Most of you, as a local ground, I acknowledge that just a few of you, as an international law familiarity in some way, who has an international law background, international studies among you, is they have international law.
It's an international law.
International law, international criminal law. Okay. Pretty good. So, just international recognize is necessary then. Everyone maybe knows what is an international agreement. International agreement, just oversimplifying, is an agreement between subjects of international law. States are the main subjects of international law, but not the only one. International organizations are subjects of international law, for example. Insurgents are, for example, subjects of international law. Today, even we are subjects of international law. Each individual, each person, physical person, is in some way a subject of international law. Okay? The international agreement is an agreement which binds the parties of the agreement. Is created among several phases. The first phase is negotiation. Okay, so the parties who want to bind themselves to an agreement meet once again to negotiate the text of the new text of the treaty. Once the text of the treaty is ready and everyone is willing to sign, the next step is signing the treaty. Okay? And then there are the effects of the treaty, which binds mostly the parties of the treaty. There are some treaties also that binds other third parties. Okay, that's an international agreement oversimplified. And an international agreement is composed by two parts: the preamble and the article part. The preamble is not article. It's not an international legal binding rules. The preamble, anyway, has a lot of effects. One is the main way to one of the main ways to understand the text of the treaty, and gives some hints about the setting in which the treaty has been created. Gives some principles which rules all the rules contained in the provided in the treaty, and so on. And then there is the text of the treaty. That's binding. That's international law. Okay. So the parties, in some way, must fulfill the obligations provided in the treaty, in the text of the treaty. Okay. If you have any other doubt, curiosity, please ask. Okay. That's oversimplifying. Well, another premise is needed, an historical premise, because international law is not being always equal. It is not always being the same during the history. Usually, international law history is divided into historical phases: the traditional international law and the modern international law. The traditional international law is the international law that belongs from the origins of the international law to the end of the Second World War. That's the traditional international law, the classic international law. After the Second World War, we speak about modern or contemporary international law. That's the international law binding the subjects of the international law, the international community from the end of the Second World War until today. Okay, what is the origin of international law? Today, most of the states and scholars agree that the origin of international law is the 1 year, in particular, the 1648, the year of the Treaty of Westphalia, the Peace of Westphalia, the treaties of Münster and Amsterdam, which ended the 30 years war. Why this is the origins of international law? Because these treaties tried in some way to regulate the use of force in international relations. The treaties of Münster and Amsterdam tried to say, okay, we cannot solve international dispute with war. We no limits to the war. We have to give rules to limit the use of force in international relations. It was a primitive tentative to regulate this, but it was. So this is the reason because this treaty is this year 1648 is the date of the beginning of international law. Another info about this lecture is that international relations during the classic international law, from the origins to the Second World, the international law tried to, in this period, regulate in some way the coexistence between states. The international law tried to give to the states some rules to say, okay, you can stay there, state, I can stay here, state, and we can live in some way in the same world. Okay? Try to regulate the coexistence between states. This was the rationale of classic international law. The rationale of modern and contemporary international law is different. International law nowadays try to give an impulse to the cooperation between states. No one encourages the mere coexistence. You stay there, I stay here, enough. But the modern international law trying to make the states cooperate among them. So you stay there, okay, I stay here, but we have to cooperate to develop progress, to go forward. This is the rationale of most of international modern rules and contemporary rules. Okay? So, given these premises, what are the principles of the United Nations Charter? Because these different rationale changed also according to United Nations Charter. The United Nations Charter was promoted at the end of the Second World War, as you know, and it gave a lot of new rules in international relations. One of these rules was the prohibition of the use of force, and also the prohibition of the threat of force. also the mere threatened force was prohibited by Article 2, paragraph 4 of the United Nations Charter. It was just that, a new way to view international relations, because until 1945, until the United Nations Charter, the use of force was in some way limited, but not prohibited. From 1945, the use of force was separated and totally prohibited from Article 2, paragraph 4 of the United Nations Charter. So, what are the principles of this United Nations Charter? Principles are provided by Article 2. The organization is members in pursuit of the purpose stated in Article 1 shall act in accordance with the following principles. There are a lot of principles. Most of them are consolidated in the modern international law. Other ones are not so strong even today in the application of international law. Take, for example, paragraph 3 of Article 2, the principle provided in paragraph 3. All members shall settle their international disputes by peaceful means in such a manner that international peace and security and justice are not endangered. This is the principle of the Charter of the United Nations, but not always it finds the right application in international community. Okay. Think also, for example, paragraph 4, all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any states, or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. This is the rule that I mentioned just before, Article 2, paragraph 4, the prohibition of the use of force, of the threat of force. Okay. Now the point is, these are the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. Why the European Union should uphold and promote these principles? Because you may know that today almost all the states of the international community are members of the United Nations. So all the states of the international community are bound by these principles, must fulfill this obligation because they are signed the Charter of the United Nations. So why the European Union should uphold and promote these principles? These principles should be applied according to the Charter of the United Nations. The Charter of the United Nations needs someone that uphold and promote these principles. Do you have an idea about this? Do you have some instant reply, answer to this question? An idea? Okay. Let's try to skim it together. Have you seen that Article 2 refers to the purposes stated in Article 1? So, in some way, the purposes of the United Nations should be in some way included among the principles of the United Nations. What are such purposes? The purposes of the United Nations are to maintain international peace and security, and to the end, to take effective collective measures for the prevention and removal of threats to the peace, and so on and so on. Okay? To develop friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of people, and to take all appropriate measures to strengthen universal peace. Another purpose that must be underlined is that provided by paragraph 3 to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, or humanitarian character, and promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms for all, without distinctions as to race, sex, language, or religion. Okay, this is some of this I read together with you, are some of the purposes of the United Nations. It's also provided in paragraph 4, but it's not so relevant for our discussion. Now, the point is that EU international agreements and promote respect for such principles in the United Nations Charter in the world. So we have to look also to the rules of European Unions about this, which is the so-called legal basis of that, which are the rules provided in the European Union treaties about this. So the European Union, in this regard, on Article 3.5, says that in its relations with the wider world, the Union should and promote its values and interests and contribute to the protection of the citizens. It should contribute to, not by chance, peace, security, the sustainable development of the earth, solidarity, and mutual respect among peoples, free and fair trade, eradication of poverty and protection of human rights, in particular the rights of the child, as well as to the strict observance and the development of international law, including respect for the principles of the United Nations Charter. So this is a duty, in some way, of the European Union, a duty to uphold and promote its values, among these, the respect for the principles of the United Nations Charter. So from the European Union point of view, this is clear. The European Union itself is real. Promote, uphold the principle of the United Nations Charter. It's okay. Please.
I may ask a question. What would happen if EU member state would leave the United Nations but stay within the European Union?
If the European Union member states?
If a European Union member state, for example, in a hypothetical situation, leave the United Nations but stay in the European Union, how would this article then would it be respected, or how would that work?
If the European member state is not a state member of the United Nations.
If, for example, the Netherlands would tomorrow leave the United
For example?
If, for example, the Netherlands would tomorrow leave the United Nations.
Okay. So international law is regulated by several principles, not the United Nations Charter, not only the United Nations Charter. One of these principles is the principle of effectiveness. So I can discuss about something real, not something hypothetical. We can elaborate and try to, in some way, hypothesize something, but it's not strictly international global discussion in this way. Okay, the point is that nowadays all the states are United Nations member states, all the states. So your hypothesis could be good to discuss for hours, but it's not fruitful, it's effective.
Well, some of the states are observers, right? And what if they are not in the United Nations, they do not sign and ratify the charter? What happens then?
Okay, that's correct. There are a lot of observers in the United Nations, but in some way there are not states according to international law. The states according to international law is such that effectively has a government, territory, people, and in some way the capacity of international relations. Okay, so for example, we will look at that in this lecture. Transnistria is not appropriately a state because it's a people for sure, but this territory is not defined and it has not a government able to rule its territory. Okay. Any other question? Does? Okay. Anyway, we speak about European Union nowadays and all the member states of the European Union are also member states of the United Nations. Okay. So it's another article about our lecture, and it's Article 21.1 of the Treaty on European Union, and it provides that the Union's action on the international scene should be guided by the principles which are inspired in its own creation, development and enlargement, and in which it seeks to advance while the world. Democracy, the rule of law, the universality and invisibility of human rights and fundamental freedoms, respect for human dignity, the principle of equality and solidarity, and respect, once again, for the principle of the United Nations Charter and international law. As I told you before, there are principles of international law which are proposed by principle of the United Nations Charter and other ones. Okay. Article 21.1, we look at them together, is followed by Article 21.2. The Union should define and pursue common policy and action and should work for a high degree of cooperation in all fields of international relations in order to several objectives. Among these are C. Preserve peace, prevent conflicts, and strengthen international security in accordance with the purposes and principles of United Nations Charter. The last one for our lecture is Article 42.1. The common security defense policy should be an integral part of the common foreign and security policy. It should provide the Union, and so on and so on and so on. Conflict prevention, standard international security in accordance with the principles of the United Nations Charter. Okay. This refers also to European Union missions on that. In fact, the rule says that the Union may use them on missions outside the Union for peacekeeping, conflict prevention, and strengthening international security in accordance with the principles of the United Nations Charter. Okay, so it is quite evident that the European Union member states in some way obliged themselves to fulfill these obligations. So to make a lot of things according to the principle of the United Nations Charter. This will also uphold and promote these principles. Now, let's look together to this principle in several European Union agreements with third parties. In the first lecture delivered by Professor Pasquale, at the beginning of the winter school, Professor Pasquale divided the European Union agreements in several types of agreements. So let's check one agreement for one type. Okay, one category. About the free trade agreements, we could look at the free trade agreement between the European Union its member states of the one part and the Republic of Korea for the other part. We call it as well. Well, in this agreement of 2011, in the preamble, it says, reaffirming the commitment to the Charter of the United Nations signed in San Francisco on 26 June 1945. This is no mention to the principles of the United Nations or the Charter of the United Nations. Okay? It is mentioning only the Charter of the United Nations, in general speaking. Okay? And at Article 15.9, we can find that nothing in this agreement shall be construed to prevent any party from taking any action in order to carry out its international obligation for the purpose of maintaining international peace and security. We have here no explicit recalling to the principle of the United Nations, but we find the principle of the United Nations Charter. It is evident. You remember, it says that among the principles of the United Nations Charter, we have also to settle the international dispute by peaceful means in such a manner that international peace and security and justice are not endangered. All members shall refrain their international relations from the threat of the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any states, and so on. And we define such principles in this article 15.9 of the Free Trade Agreement between the European Union and its member states and the Republic of Korea, because it says that nothing in this agreement shall be construed to prevent any party from taking any action in order to carry out its international obligations for the purpose of maintaining international peace and security. Okay. Why? The European Union and the Republic of Korea has provided that. We have the principles of the Charter of the United Nations that impose to the states that why the European Union and the Republic of Korea wish to underline or impede in some way that in his agreement. Do you have an idea of this?
Maybe it depends on the situation.
Two.
the specific trade agreement that might still be different from certain articles of the charter, let's say?
Because they are different in the context, you say?
Yes.
Mhm. Well, if the regulation is to not use the force, also the triple force, you can switch the context. That's the rule. Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the Charter of the United Nations, related together says the prohibition of use of force, also the threat of use of force. Even if I, as a state, just threaten another state with force, not using it, okay, you cannot do it. There are a few exceptions to this principle, you know. One of these is self-defense, for example. Another one is when the Security Council of the United Nations authorize the use of force. In this case, you can use the force in international relations legitimately. But in any other case, you cannot do it. So we have this rule, we have this principle. Why European Union and its member states, the Republic of Korea, have repeated it in some way? Okay. No question, no answer. No. Let's take another example of another kind of agreement, of European Union agreement. This is a stabilization association agreement. These are agreements concluded by the European Union with, in some way, candidate states, which wish to enter into the European Union. Okay, and this is the agreement between European communities, because it's signed by the European Union on a part and the European Atomic Energy Community on the other part. Okay, to different international organizations and the member states, and the Republic of Montenegro on the other part. Republic of Montenegro is a candidate state, is a state which wants to enter into the European Union, and this agreement is a step in order to Republic of Montenegro become a member state in the future of the European Union. Okay. In the preamble, we find that considering the commitment of the parties to the full implementation of all principles and provisions of the United Nations Charter, of the OSCE, so as to contribute to regional stability and cooperation among the countries of the region. We could find here a clear recalling of the principle of the United Nations Charter, the principle we have read together just before, to the full implementation of all principles and provisions of the United Nations Charter, which aim is of this commitment to contribute to regional stability and cooperation among the countries of the region. Maybe the question could be of the easiest answer. Why this? Why these states, the Republic of Montenegro, obviously is a member states of the United Nations, European Community, European Union is an observer of the United Nations, and all the member states of the European Union are member states also of the United Nations. But all these states that are already state members of the United Nations says that. No. I hear about this. Okay, go on. The preamble, as I said before, is not article law binding. Okay, Article 1 is article law binding. The preamble is considered soft law. Soft law, and international soft law is very important for a lot of purposes, also because it contributes to the development of international law. The soft law could tell you in the future international law will be so. Okay, and it's useful for the interpretation of the treaty. I have some doubts on Article 1, and it says an association. I read it properly. I look at the preamble, and the preamble could help me in this interpretation. Okay, and the preamble also gives some premises to the article law. This is the article law rules, Article 1, and so on, but the preamble says, okay, all these rules must read with these eyes, the eyes of the preamble. Okay. So in Article 1, we find a lot of provisions and also the aims, the objectives of this association between European Communities and Republic of Montenegro. And among these, we find also, for example, to provide an adequate framework for political dialogue, allowing the development of close political relations between the parties. And if you remember, these are one of the principles of the Charter of the United Nations, the cooperation, the dialogue between states. Once again, letter D, to support the efforts of Montenegro to develop its economic international cooperation, including, etc., etc. Cooperation is another principle, if you remember, of the Charter of the United Nations. And this is we said at the beginning of the lecture, one of the rationale of modern international law, cooperation among states, not only the mere coexistence. You stay there, I stay here. Enough. Okay. Once again, to foster regional cooperation in all the fields covered by this agreement. But in this stabilization association agreement between European Communities and the Republic of Montenegro, we find also another provision stated by Article 5. And the provision says international regional peace and stability, the development of good neighbor relations, human rights, and the respect and protection of minorities are central to the stabilization association process, referred to the conclusion of the Council of the European Union on June 1990. There is a clear calling to peace and stability at the international level and at the regional level as well, and the development of good neighbor relations. Once again, good neighbor relations. So that means peaceful relations, cooperations, and so on, and respect and protection of minorities. You remember the protection, the respect and protection of all minorities is one of the rules provided by the Treaty of the European Union. Once again, Article 6, this agreement says that Montenegro, only Montenegro commits itself to continue to foster cooperation and good neighbor relation with the other countries of the region. Only Montenegro must fulfill this obligation in Article 6. No, the state parties, the parties of this agreement, European Community on the hand, and Republic of Montenegro on the other hand. Not all who signed this agreement, but just Montenegro committed itself to this. This is a not so often found in international agreement that only one part of the agreement commits itself to do something. In most of the treaty, most of the time, you find that all the same parties, all the parties of the agreement commit themselves to fulfill the obligations of the agreement. Not just one and the other one not. Not in this case. In this case, only Montenegro commits itself. This commitment, says the final part of Article 6, constitutes a key factor in the development of the relations and cooperations between the parties and thus contributes to regional stability. Once again. Lastly,
Can I ask?
yeah.
Why is it only Montenegro?
Okay, the reason is that in this provision, you may find clearly how the European Union uphold and promote the principle. Because until now, we have found that the European Union and the other part committed themselves. Also, in these provisions, European Union in some way approved and promotes the principle of United Nations. Why? Because European Union did that in the negotiation phase. Okay, during the negotiations between the other party, the European Union said, okay, we make an agreement with you, but we commit themselves to do this, and the principle of United Nations. Okay, it's a more subtle way to promote this principle. It's less elegant. You cannot look at this at a glance. Okay, but the European Union did that also in negotiation phase. In this article, this is evident because not only European Union did that in negotiation phase, but only in the part law text of the treaty. European Union must not commit to that because it just do that.
To me, but I don't have a law background, but it seems kind of weird that at one hand, a lot of law seems very superfluous to read like too much and that things are stated double. That it's both in the UN Charter and in all these agreements. And then for this very specific thing, the EU is not committing itself in the article because it has already done so. But I would say if you're like saying everything over and over again, you might as well include all parties here.
Well, because the reason is the historical context of this agreement and of this article. If you look at the adjective is regional stability. The reason is that in that period, looking better also in this period, in that region, there is not a good stability. Okay, but this is a region in some way distant from the European Union. The region of Montenegro and the West Balkans, cited by also this by Professor Pasquale in his first lecture, in some way is separated also from a geographical point of view from the European Union. Okay, so European Union cannot commit itself to do something so far away from him, from this point of view, in this context. Okay.
Yeah.
For sure, not like the stability in regions so far, regional stability can contribute, of course, but not to the point to commit itself in this way.
Yeah.
And with this wording of the article, only Montenegro could commit itself. Okay.
That's fair.
Well, the last article, where we can find another recovery of a principle of the United Nations Charter, is Article 9. We provide a lot of exceptions to the obligation to provide assistance. Among these, we likely assistance may be refused or may be subject to the satisfaction of certain conditional requirements in cases where the parties of the opinion that assistance under this protocol will be likely to prejudice the sovereignty of Montenegro or that of a member state which has been requested to provide assistance under this protocol. Be likely to prejudice the sovereignty of Montenegro. You remember the sovereignty of the states are one of the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. You remember? The organization is based on the principle of the sovereign equality of all its members, for example. And nothing contained in the present charter shall authorize the United Nations to intervene in matters which are essentially within domestic jurisdiction of any state. And so on and so on. Okay. Sorry, I'm a bit slow. Switching. Also, this is according to the principle of the United Nations. Okay. Once again, the question is why? Why are we writing what is already provided by the United Nations Charter? Okay, maybe at this point we could try to give an answer to this question. We have read these principles, but the point is that in the process, in the application of international law, not always these principles are correctly applied, has effectiveness in the practice. Think about peaceful relations in states, for example. There is a prohibition of use of force, or also the threat of use of force, but in practice, sometimes the use of force finds an application. Sometimes finds a wrongful application. Okay, sometimes some states use the force even if it permitted by the Charter of the United Nations. What does it mean? It means that the United Nations rules, the international law rules are not rules because they are not respected. Everyone could give a different answer to this question. My point of view is that these are rules at all affairs from a legal point of view, and saying that international rules are not rules because sometimes are not correctly, appropriately applied. It's like saying that a criminal code does not exist because there are models, for example, of thefts, some robbery. Okay, a criminal code gives rules that must be applied. Sometimes that rules are not followed by people, and this is a criminal offense. The criminal code exists and criminal rules exist and are applied. Okay, from an international point of view, there are international rules. If they are not applied, and if there are some wrongdoings, these produce an international responsibility. That's so. Okay. Anyway, sometimes these rules need someone to implement these rules, to manage these rules. Okay, and the European Union tried to do that. When the European Union and other parties repeat this principle in the United Nations, it's, among other things, a way to enforce these rules, to give a concrete, a new application of these rules. Okay, it's repeat, okay, we don't murder someone. Don't. Okay. And in some way, and we find on some minutes, the European Union imposes this to other parties. Other parties that don't want to follow some principles or some values or some rules of international law. And the European Union says, you have to do it that. Okay. This is a reason. Another reason could be that since the peace is a real, but this is not always in the practice, this is a way to enforce this, to say to the world, to the wider world, as it says, the title of this lecture, these are our rules, even if these rules cannot, in this moment, find an application in the reality. Okay, so there is the provision of use of force, the obligation to solve peacefully the international disputes, and so on. But these are rules of 1945. This is a way of repeat that these rules are valid, efficient, also today in 2010, for example. Okay, it contributes to strengthen the international law, to say so and so and so on. These are the rules. These are the rules. Despite the reality, these are the rules. Reality shows the wrongdoings. Because what you see, the reality are the wrongdoings. What is correct is this. Okay. Good. Let's take another example. Another association agreement between European Union and European Atomic Energy Community, the Member States, and the Republic of Moldova. Another association agreement because also Moldova wants to become a member state of the European Union. And once again, we find in the preamble an explicit recalling of all the principles and provisions of the Charter of the United Nations. You see, in the association agreement, there is also an explicit recalling to the principle of the Charter of the United Nations. Instead, in the trade agreement, the recalling is not so explicit. Why? The reason is quite obvious, because it's a way for the European Union to say to the candidate states, okay, you want to become a member state of the European Union, but you have to respect the principles and provisions of the Charter of the United Nations. It's explicit in this way. Okay. Once again, there is a lot of commitments about cooperation and so on. And once again, there is a calling to another principle, the principles of respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, inviolability of borders and independence, as established in the Charter of the United Nations. You remember, also this is a principle of the United Nations Charter, the territorial integrity, the sovereignty of a member state, the equal sovereignty of all of the member states of the United Nations. Okay? Why this? Why this recalling to the sovereignty of place?
Well, it isn't not a question, but isn't this hollow as well? Because the URA says territorial integrity, but de facto in Moldova there isn't territorial integrity.
Correct.
So isn't this reaffirmation also hollow?
Yeah.
Isn't it also a message to Russia, a geopolitical point of view, to reaffirm the sovereignty of Moldova?
In these years, 2014, it's not Russia, it's Transnistria.
Yeah, but with Russian base.
In some way, with Russian influence, but Transnistria wants its own independence in some way. And it's a very complicated issue. It's a territorial issue, very complicated, but oversimplifying, the recalling is for the context of reality. The context of reality is that the Republic of Moldova has a part of its territory which in some way claims independence. That's Transnistria. Transnistria never claimed independence officially, but in other ways. So it's very complicated. Okay. And Transnistria is also an observer in United Nations, possibly. So, please.
Has there ever been a case when the European Union has taken a step that violated the agreement to international law?
I didn't.
Has there ever been a case when the European Union has taken another state that has an agreement with the European Union to a court to violating?
And international law, you mean?
Yeah.
I think about this, but for these claims,
No, in general, any case that the European Union has taken to international law.
not the International Court of Justice, for sure. Don't know if
No, because there's no need to bring somebody to court because association agreements are pre-adhesion agreement basically. So if the other part does not respect the association agreement, then the adhesion process does not go on. There's no real need to have a decision. The European Union unilaterally decides to freeze the negotiations, and that's it. That's what happens.
So you mentioned this artificial people, okay. That's the wise of the reply. Okay. And also on page 3, we can find that those efforts shall follow commonly shared principles of maintaining international peace and security and established by the Charter of the United Nations. You see, we find here not only a general recalling to the principle of the United Nations Charter, but a specific recalling of a specific principle of the United Nations Charter, the principles of maintaining international peace and security as established by the Charter of the United Nations. Once again, the reason is given by the practical, the real context of the treaty. Okay, because the risk is that Moldova could possibly use the force against Brazil. Today never meant that, but okay, time is going by. We should also to give a glance to the agreement between the International Criminal Court and the European Union on Cooperation Assistance. The agreement is before the Treaty of Lisbon, 2006, but there is a council decision on that because the international agreement concluded by the European Union sometimes are followed by council decision. The council is an institution of the European Union, and the council in some way give application to the treaty inside the European Union. It's a sort of domestication of international agreements concluded by the European Union. The problem is that European Union concluded an agreement with the International Criminal Court. You know, the International Criminal Court is an international court which has the power to prosecute international criminal offenders, okay, who commits international crime, genocide, and so on. Okay. Well, this is an agreement between two international organizations because International Criminal Court is an international organization by itself, as is International European Union. This is an agreement between the European Union and the international organization, International Criminal Court. Why is for several reasons, but also for the respect and for promoting and upholding the principle of the United Nations Charter. In fact, in the Council decision, we can read that one of the objectives of the Union is to preserve peace, prevent conflicts, and strengthen international security in accordance with the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter. We can find here a declaration of the European Union. We cannot find here that parties commit themselves. Just the European Union wants to declare that one of its objectives is to preserve peace, prevent conflicts, strengthen international security, and so on. Okay. And if you remember, there is also another principle provided in the Article 2 of the United Nations Charter. And the principle of justice. You remember justice. Well, this is clear and application on behalf of the European Union for that. The European Union wants to make an agreement with the International Criminal Court. Also to uphold and promote one of the principles of the United Nations Charter. Justice. And in Article 1, once again, we may find that all of this is made in accordance with the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations. Okay, that's an example of an agreement between two international organizations, the European Union and another international organization, and for the purposes of one of the principles of the Charter, justice. Okay. Well, it could be the analysis you follow with other international agreements. What could you think about that in sum? What are the conclusions that you can give to yourself on all of this? Any idea? Any?
With subjects for international law has a prohibition of owning up to human in the examples. Had to be
After this analysis, you could say that and say, okay, every preamble or every agreement should recall the principles of the United Nations. It's not so. There are also some agreements concluded by the European Union that does not recall at all the principle of the United Nations. Anyway, explicit and implicit in some way, subtle. Okay. And what else?
That the Union Charter is used to emphasize certain principles in certain things. I mean, it's very general, but more than it's used like an instrument, like a legal instrument.
Yeah, my question is if there are other legal instruments to report these principles.
That's an interesting question, but I actually thought of an answer, like to yours, like
Good point. What else? Okay. Thank you so much, everyone.